Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I would like to call this meeting to order. It's the regular meeting of the Madera City Council and a special meeting of the Madera Public Finance Authority on September 6, 2017. Sonia, can you do roll call, please?
Yes. Mayor Authority Member Andrew Medellin, absent. Mayor Pro Tem Authority Member Cece Foley Gallegos.
Here.
Council Authority Member Jose Rodriguez.
Here.
Council Authority Member Donald Hawley.
Present.
Council Authority Member Derek Robinson.
Present.
Council Authority Member Will Oliver.
Here.
And Council Authority Member Charles Rigby.
Here.
I would like to call up Pastor Mike Unger from the Madera Rescue Mission for the invocation, please.
The invocation or prayer. I was here for prayer. I don't. Seriously. Would someone else take the invocation for me?
Oh, the prayer? It's the prayer.
I have the prayer.
Okay.
Sorry for all the confusion. Let's bow our heads. Father, in heaven we come to you in the name of Jesus. And God, with all the confusion and madness in this world today, God, I would imagine myself and others in this room are scratching our heads wondering why. God, I'm not good enough. We're not smart enough. We are not at liberty to know why or how. But we are asking, God, for you to bring comfort and peace to all those folks in places beyond Madera that are being crushed by winds and rain and fire, to the degree that today, God, I think have to pause and have to look at this thing that's going on and say, God, we trust you, even if we don't understand you. We praise you even though we struggle right now. God, there's people in this room that are affected by folks that are in other places of this country. And God, we ask you to bring them peace. And I ask now, God, as we bring it in and we think of Madera, I couldn't help but think as I'm driving here, Father, that the problems that are going on in Madera, I would think in many ways pale in comparison to the issues that are going on in places beyond Madera. So God, help us to understand those things. Help us to figure those things out here locally. I pray, God, that our leadership would continue to lead and would take up that baton of understanding that the people here are the people they serve and that they would serve well. Bless them tonight in their business. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Unger. Salute the flag. Ready? Salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, it's public comment. The first 15 minutes of the meeting are reserved for members of the public to address the council agency on items which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council agency. Speakers shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers will be asked to identify themselves and state the subject of their comment. If the subject is an item on the agenda, I, the Mayor Pro Tem, have the option of asking the speaker to hold their comments until the item is called. Comments on the items listed as public hearing on the agenda should be held until the hearing is open. The council agency is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no advice conclusion should be drawn to the council agency does not respond to the public comment at this time. Is there any members of the public who would like to address the council? Please state your name and address for our records.
DJ Becker, Harbor Court, Madera, California, and my comments are on homelessness. And I'm going to read this since I'm a little better at the written word. Greetings, Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you for your recent efforts regarding the cleanup of the homeless encampment near the Tozier Bridge. The cleanup of that area has been effective and was greatly appreciated by the area residents. However, I would like to invite you to now take a stroll across Gateway Bridge in the center of our city. There are many new tents, tarps, shacks lining both sides of that river area, along with large piles of discarded possessions and trash all over. If Fresno succeeds with their new ordinance outlawing camping on private or public properties later this month, many of their estimated 1,500 or so homeless individuals will soon be looking for a new place to live and to camp. It's logical that some of them could relocate here. Homelessness is a chronic and intractable issue, but perhaps with planning and preparation, we may be able to reduce the scope of the problem facing our city. Many Madera residents are also unsure who to contact about these ongoing problems. Could this topic please be placed on a future agenda of a Madera City Council meeting for public comment and discussion, and/or perhaps a commission on homelessness be explored? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becker.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, I'm Gary Savanda, and I reside at 3544 Seaside Drive here in the city of Madera. I'm here to thank the council, first of all, for your commitment to the Intergovernmental Relations Workshop to be held in September 30th out at the Municipal Golf Course. But second of all, I'd like to ask all potential participants to stick around in the afternoon and participate in our 9-hole golf outing. We think that maybe spending a couple of hours with each other with a putter in our hands may help us to get to know each other a little bit better and foster a little better intergovernmental relations. We hope to name a winner before the end of the afternoon and let that winner designate a recipient of a nice check in the name of the intergovernmental group. We think that will make an excellent visual that 4 electeds from our 3 different groups and organizations would be donating the money to a local charity of their choice. So again, I think many things can be settled over a putting green rather than a podium, and we would ask, I handed out some applications to the city clerk. She has them. I solicit your participation in the second half of the workshop in the morning, a little fun with golf of 9 holes in the afternoon. Thank you so much.
Hi there. Can everybody hear me all right? Sounds like it. Okay. My name is Renee Benoit, and for the record, that's Benoit. I live at 18420 Fairfield Drive here in Madera, and I'd like to thank and reiterate the woman over there. I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but anyway, what she said was excellent, and I agree with everything she said. I also like to thank the council or whoever, I don't know who it was exactly, but for the cleanup efforts that you've done so far, because my topic, which I'm sorry I didn't state at the outset, was about the homeless. And so I'd like to thank the council for what efforts you've made so far, and I think it's been great. More needs to be done, and we all know that. I don't think that the homeless issue is going to go completely away. So my thoughts on it would be that maybe we could figure out how to help them be more clean, how to pick up after themselves. Maybe porta potties, maybe dumpsters, I don't know, strategically placed so they could dispose of their trash. Because I'm sure on the river there isn't anything right now, and we certainly don't want them doing their business in the river. That's very unsanitary. I also think it would be a great idea if we could get more support for the mission so they could do their job. And the last thing I wanted to say was that where are the homeless? Who speaks for them? That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kim Salter. I live at 1432 Penny Way in Madera. I would also like to thank the lady that spoke first and reiterate that's wonderful what you said, and that's definitely what we need to have happen. And thank you for your efforts in cleaning up the encampment. It was done speedy. There still have been some problems that we do have in the city that she talked about. We have the one that's over on the other side of the river, over by Jack in the Box. It's a huge pile of garbage. There are tents over there. We've had people literally sleeping on the sidewalk. Yesterday I encountered a guy, tattooed face, in and out of traffic asking for donations. So there's a few of us that talk on the Nextdoor app, and we'd really like to see this brought to the agenda. We try and make sure that we include everybody in positive input with it. We did have one person that couldn't make it tonight, and that was Hendrick, and he spoke last time. But we're kind of taking the torch, but not literally, like the newspaper said. And I'm trying to go on, but we really would like to have this addressed from the council. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I want to add a quick comment in regards to Ms. Salter's public comment as well as the others. I know that we have initiated an inquiry with the organizers for the two-city and county intergovernmental agency meeting to discuss homelessness, as it's an issue across the board. And I just wanted to maybe ask of staff to follow up with folks across the street to make sure that that be placed on that agenda.
I'm sorry, through the chair, yes, sir, we will.
Great, thank you.
I don't see anybody else coming up for public comment. I would like to thank our community members for coming up and sharing their concerns. So at this time, I would like to close public comment. And I would like to call on our city clerk for a late distribution announcement.
Thank you. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, members of the public are advised that documents related to the following agenda item were distributed to the council less than 72 hours before this meeting. First item is a revised agenda, was distributed showing a revised title for item B5. The revised agenda is available in the trays located by the exit doors. The second item is under Section B, the consent calendar. Again, item B5. Subject matter on that is a resolution approving an agreement for temporary staffing services. A revised report and resolution were distributed to the council this evening. Extra copies are available at the podium for members of the public wishing a copy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. At this time, we have a presentation, and I would like to call to the podium Mr. Bob Winslow to join me. Mr. Winslow is here tonight to share with us an event that's having an 86th anniversary. It's the Old Timers Day Parade in the city of Madera, and it's an event that has been going on for many years, as you know. And it's not just city, county employees also get involved. And so I would like Bob to tell us a little bit about it and not take all his kudos away about this great event.
Thank you, Cece, and members of the council. Yes, I'm here representing the Madera County Historical Society, and of course we are fast approaching another week of Old Timers Day activities. And as Cece said, the 86th anniversary, so we've been doing it for quite a long time. We'll have the parade, and we'll have booths in the park, and basically be doing everything we've done in past years. There'll be a jail out there, and I did want to say that you guys are probably familiar with the jail. Old Timers Days kind of celebrates the formation of the city and the county of Madera. When we were the old West, and a cowboy wouldn't want to be without his hat, so I made sure I had my hat. But in a couple of weeks when we have the jail, in other words, your hat won't work. You need to have a little facial hair, a beard or mustache or what have you, and that'll get you to be a cowboy. But if you really need to cowboy up, you can get a badge to stay out of jail. So we'll have those available next week, and we'll bring those around. So you can, for $5, you can stay out of jail, and that goes to the Historical Society. Otherwise, you might be in jail for a while. So, but we have bread and water, so we'll take care of all those in jail. So we look forward to another good year, and appreciate all the support that that the city offers and lends. So thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Bob, at this time, I would like to present you. This year is the 86th anniversary of Old Timers Day in the city of Madera, and we take great pleasure in honoring the old timers city of the city and county and conveying our sincere gratitude and appreciation for the dedication and efforts and contributions to help shape this history in Madera. So I therefore hold this proclamation, and on behalf of the city of Madera, I proclaim September 19th through the 23rd, 2017 to be the Old Timers Day week. DJ wants it. Your cowboy hat. I should have brought my hat. I didn't even think about it.
And let me say one other thing. I talked about being a cowboy and having your hat or growing your beard. It does apply to the women too. I didn't want to leave them out. But they're all they have to do pretty simple. They just need to wear a little Western wear, kind of the style of the Old West there too. So that can keep them out of jail also. So there you are.
Got it. We need a badge too. We'll need a badge.
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes, badges for both the men and the women. So we'll see you out there come a few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
At this time, we're moving on to our workshop, and I would like to call up, let's see who it is, Larry Burkamp from the Muniservices, who's going to give us a workshop on cannabis and California cities. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having me here. My name is Larry Burkamp with Muniservices. Just a little bit about my background before I go on. I've recently started working for Muniservices back in, it's been 2015. Prior to that, I worked for the Board of Equalization, the state tax agency, for about 29 years, but been involved in the cannabis industry since about 2005, 2003, when the state started issuing taxes on the medical dispensaries. And all the way through my career since 2005, no matter where I moved, the cannabis came with me because nobody else wanted to deal with it. So up until I left in 2014, I was involved in cannabis. So what we're doing here is just providing an overview of the cannabis industry, commercial cannabis industry for cities in the state. And this is just sort of an overview of Prop 64. And as you look at it, you can see at the top it talks about how the state, the county, and the city voted for on Prop 64. And basically what Prop 64 does is it legalizes adult non-medicinal use of marijuana. It does not change local government's ability to regulate or place taxes on medicinal or non-medicinal marijuana. Became effective on November 9th, 2016. However, most of the components of the recreational activities with regard to cannabis will go in effect in January of 2018. And then recently there was SB 94 that sort of reconciled some of the medicinal and recreational components of Prop 64. Prior to that, the state was working on only medicinal regulation, and once Prop 64 passed, SB 94 tried to consolidate and combine some of those issues, so they weren't doing two things at the same time. Some of the restrictions under Prop 64 is that it restricts where marijuana can be smoked, processing marijuana for personal use, and then growing marijuana, and then giving away marijuana. The agencies that are currently regulating cannabis in the state are the Bureau of Cannabis Control, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and the Department of Public Health, and the Department of Tax and Fee Administration, which is formerly the Board of Equalization. That just recently changed not too long ago. And then as far as cities and counties go, the cities and counties can maintains their authority over the cannabis industry, the commercial cannabis industry, whether it's a full ban or authorizing any or all segments of the commercial cannabis industry within the jurisdiction. And you can also regulate personal cultivation to a certain extent. Some high levels. What is allowed? Consumption can take place in a private residence or a business that's licensed for on-site marijuana consumption. Possession up to 28.5 grams, about an ounce of marijuana, and about 8 grams of concentrated, such as hash. Where can plants be grown for personal use? Personal use up to 6 living plants per residence. What's not allowed? Pretty much smoking marijuana follows most of the smoking requirements. So where smoking is banned, smoking marijuana is also banned. Cannot be possessed on school grounds, daycare centers, youth centers, or where children are present. Growing is not allowed in the unlocked or in a visible from a public place. And providing marijuana to minors under the age of 21 for non-medicinal use is also prohibited. Some of the public safety and health issues that come along with commercial cannabis. And I note at the bottom that even though whether you ban or authorize cannabis, this will still be some of the issues involved in the city because the black market is still pretty prevalent and consumption is still taking place. But there's the public intoxication, driving enforcement. There's still not a public standard for DUI for cannabis. There's some things that are ongoing and some tests that are being done, but currently there's no like breathalyzer test for cannabis at this point. Housing and cooperative enforcement regulations, neighborhoods, what's going on around the residents, youth programs, how it's impacting the youth in the city. It is still primarily a cash-based business, so there's issues with robberies and home crimes with regard to the cannabis industry. Enforcement, still got the illegal market out there, and with the legalization, it's going to be a little bit harder to determine what's illegal and what's legal as far as possessions. And then cultivation and manufacturing, that's a new area that's coming along, and that brings along its whole set of new issues with regard to use of chemicals and pesticides and wastes and water use and other components, including like electricity and some of the public utilities with regard to those activities. Understanding the market for your jurisdiction, that's one of the biggest issues we've dealt with as far as trying to figure out what's right for your community. Understanding what the demand is, what the market studies show, or what's already occurring in your jurisdiction. What kind of resources and requirements for permitting and regulation and compliance? What are your resource needs if you decide to authorize any cannabis operations? Again, what already exists in your community and region? The black market's already here to a certain extent, and so we need to understand that. And then also understanding what's available in your jurisdiction for allowing the cannabis industry, what kind of warehouse space or retail space or areas that are available for the industry that also meets the setbacks and requirements from the city and the state. Again, this goes a little bit more detail as far as understanding the risk and impacts. Again, researching what's available and what's right for your community. If you decide to go with any kind of commercial cannabis, drafting language for ordinances, making sure that you have the right language. The nice thing now is the state is drafting language for both medicinal and recreational cannabis. So what we recommend is you try to leverage the state law codes as much as possible to make sure that you're not recreating the wheel. Plus, if something changes at the state level, you don't have to go back and rewrite yours. You can basically adopt what's changed at the state level. And then we also encourage input from key demographics such as law enforcement, parents' organizations, ethnic groups, Chamber of Commerce. Find out what's really wanted in your community. Other issues to consider. It's still a federal one, narcotic, so it's illegal at the federal level. And that goes into the status of the Cole Memo, which basically dealt with the banking issues and what banks can do. Banking is still has limited access to the industry. There are some industries that have used banking, but sometimes they get creative in their names and their DBAs, and once the bank finds out that it's actually a cannabis activity, they will close their accounts. And then again, the black market's still out there, and so you're competing with that as you move forward. Again, what's acceptable for the community? There's various different types of industries within the cannabis, commercial cannabis activities: cultivation, manufacturing, testing, distribution, retail sales, delivery, and then whether you want to go with medicinal or recreational or a combination of both. And then when it's not on there is a complete ban of the industry altogether. Each one of those has different impacts and issues involved with it. So if you have a lot of manufacturing, warehouse space, manufacturing might be one. If you don't want to have the visible impact of cannabis. You can take one of the industries that basically manufacturing, testing, distributions basically can operate within a jurisdiction but may not be visible to the citizens because they wouldn't have any outside or outward appearance that it was a cannabis industry. State, local taxes and fees, there's going to be a lot of them. So on the far left, the sales and use tax, that's currently applied to, it applies to a certain extent to medicinal. As of after the election of Prop 64, there was a component that said that medicinal cannabis is now exempt from sales and use tax. But that's only if the purchaser has a state-issued medical ID card, which statewide there's probably about 18 to 20,000 of those issued. So the majority of the purchasers do not have that card. So at this point, medicinal cannabis is, for the most part, is still subject to sales and use tax. Starting January 1st, there will be a retail tax of 15% on gross receipts on retail sales, and then also a cultivation tax of $9.25 per ounce for flower and $2.75 per ounce for leaves. The new tax and fee agency is in the process of now trying to figure out how they're going to implement those taxes. Now, those are state-level taxes, and we'll go into that a little bit shortly as far as how those will be allocated. On the far right, you have city excise taxes, and they can be applied to both medicinal and non-medicinal cannabis. And they can be placed on cultivation, retail, manufacturing, broker, testing, all the different various segments of the business industry. And for the most part, those are they can be applied on gross receipts, square footage, or quantity. And then you've also have city administrative fees, and they can be applied, generated to application fees, license fees, renewal fees, administration fees to cover the cost for the city to administer the industry within your jurisdiction. Again, the business license tax allows revenue to be appropriated to any municipal purpose unless the tax has been approved as a special tax, a specific tax for specific purposes, and that would require a 2/3 vote. So a general tax, general fund tax would just be a majority. A specific purpose would be a higher threshold to get through. Business regulatory fees, again, basically covers the reasonable cost for the administration of the industry within your jurisdiction. And here goes back to the state allocation fees. So even though the state's assessing those large dollar amounts, I'm not going to go through in detail here, but this just sort of gives you an idea. Initially, it goes to pay back the state administrative costs for all the different agencies that we talked about before, which is going to probably take a number of years for them to recoup their costs. And then there's various different components that can be allocated to various different public universities for research and evaluation. I think CHP is getting some things for DUI issues, various different components. And then there's youth prevention and environmental issues that can be recouped also. But the city and county are only, at this point, are only, and then after all these are done, there's going to be some grant money available to local jurisdictions for various different activities. But currently, as the law stands right now, the city or county is only eligible for those funds if they allow the industry within their jurisdiction. If they fully ban it, they may not be entitled to any of those funds. But again, it'll be a while before those funds are going to be available. As far as the industry, there's a number of different areas that need to be considered as you move forward. They're all listed here. So some of the important ones that I think are education up front, as far as educating not only city council, but also your constituents, your citizens, and also the industry. You want to make sure that they know their expectations, they know what they're required to do. So there shouldn't be. I mean, they should be. You want them to be good partners within the city. But then we also look at audits to make sure that they are both financial and compliance audits. You want to understand your resource and cost analysis. How much is it going to cost for you to administer this program? You want to continually monitor the activities of the business to make sure that what your expectations were and that they're meeting your expectations. Having a very a selection process and evaluation process for your possible industry partners to make sure that they're the type of people that you want or businesses that you want within your community, make sure that there are no issues involved. And because of the number of businesses out there, it's got to be more of a fair and a open selection process, using a scoring criteria and those type of things, because there will be appeals if someone didn't get a license when they thought they should. Ordinance review, look at your current ordinances and then look to go where you're going further or what you want to allow to make sure that your ordinances meet the requirements for the city and for the industry. And then again at revenue, determining what kind of revenue you want. Some cities just recoup their costs through the administration fees or application fees and don't assess any kind of excise taxes. Some impose an excise tax on top of the fees, or they just use their regular business application fees and then maybe have a tax on top. There's a number of different ways that cities have looked at it to determine what's best for them as far as addressing their resources and costs with industry. Do you have the right team? So you want to include all these different areas: planning, code enforcement, finance, police, fire, economic development, city attorney, and public health. They're all going to be involved in this industry, and depending on which industry you pick, it'll be weighted heavier in one or the other. And again, we talk about resources. Going back into the same thing, planning and permitting. You look at your initial costs, your ongoing costs, building safety, fire, tax and compliance audits, prevention programs. Are you going to dictate some of that money for prevention programs for youth, education programs, public relations and media? That's important to make sure that you're getting out and letting people know what's going on. Data collection and interpretation, evaluating and existing workload and city staff. So you want to make sure that you have the right resources. Do you have the staff or the number of staff available to handle the additional workload? Again, the potential costs, we talk about the permit fee, review of those. We recommend that whatever you do, you try to be flexible with regard to your ordinances and your fees and things, so you can be flexible and change with the industry. The industry is changing very rapidly, and it changes much quicker than any kind of public entity can, a state, local level. So you want to be flexible so you can make sure that you can address those changes fairly quickly as compared to having to go back and restart over and rewrite things. Considering the tax and fees and the potential impacts on the gray and the black market. We've seen some issues where some cities and counties have gone out early on and assessed higher taxes, but it turns out that they push the black market back into the sales back into the black market. And Colorado had that issue initially too, where they initially had their revenue estimates done for their first 3 months, and they increased their revenue estimates for the state of Colorado based on their initial sales. But then their customers ended up going back to the black market because recreational cannabis was selling like for $300 an ounce, medicinal was like $200 an ounce, and you could buy it on the black market for like $150. So after a couple of months of the newness wore off, the consumers went back to where it was cheaper. If you do decide to impose any kind of taxes or fees, you've got to be expected to collect bags of cash, because they're going to come in with a bag of cash and pay their fees. And if your fees are tens of thousands of dollars or the taxes are high, you're going to get lots of cash. And so some of the issues that you need to be aware of is, do you have the security in place to handle that? Do you have appropriate staff coverage? You're going to have at least duplicate duties and overlapping duties to make sure the cash is being handled properly. Video and camera placements. Facility evaluation. Some areas we've been to where they've, depending on where they're receiving the fees, they have some secured locations or rooms that they could utilize, as others did not, and so they have to look at another jurisdiction or another location within the city where they're going to accept that cash. Sometimes it went to the police department or went to the courts or somewhere else where they had a secured office to collect that. Say separation of duties. Health and safety concerns for your own staff, because a lot of the cash is going to come in with a residue on it, an odor. Some people may not want to deal with that. They may not want to work with that. So you have to have safety supplies, adequate ventilation, limited exposure, cleaning supplies. And then specialized equipment, cash counting machine, because they're going to come in with low denomination bills and large amounts of it, so you're not going to stand there and try to count 5s and 10s and 20s. You're going to want to be able to put it into a machine and have it counted out. And then, again, storage safes for security of that of the cash that comes in, and then working with your bank, Armored Car Services, how you're going to transport that cash to your financial institution. And then it's always going back to collect data, solicit feedback, plan to make changes in your ordinance or regulations based on your experience. Like I said, things will change, so you want to be flexible to be able to address those changes as they come forward. And this is just sort of a summary of our team that we have working on that, on the cannabis program. Myself, and then another, Jeff Colin is a former city manager from Santa Rosa and Beverly Hills and Pittsburgh, a couple of others. So he's been involved with, he was involved when Santa Rosa first implemented their program, so he has some direct knowledge with what the city goes through as they start embarking on this activity. And then some other, we have a staff council, and then we have a marijuana policy group that provides data and information on the various different components. And then Mike Madrid works with Grassroots Labs, which is not a pun. That was before marijuana became legalized, but they do a lot of consulting and polling information to try to get an idea what the city is interested in. And that completes my presentation. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
At this time, are there any questions from my council members? Mr. Oliver, Councilman Oliver.
That's fine. I had a quick question. Can you give us any examples as far as cities you've worked with as to what the revenue projections are? I mean, I get the kind of the tax estimates at the state level, and then obviously it depends on what happens on the local level, but can you speak to any tangible examples in your experience? And
the revenue is sort of one of those areas that's a moving target at this point because it was illegal for so long, and my experience even at the state did not and still doesn't at this point have a list of actual cannabis operations operating within the state because the Board of Equalization at that time did not want to when the feds were investigating, they didn't want to be the agency that the feds came to and got a list. So basically, to be honest, there's no full list and tax information that's coming in on those industries, but we have done some analysis. And for a dispensary, generally it's the size of a convenience store, like a 7-Eleven type thing. That's generally about the size. They can be bigger or smaller. It's about 3,000 square feet, 25 to 3,000 square feet. There is information that we've seen that came out from a study that shows that on average a dispensary has sales about $974 per square foot. So on that type of so about a 3,000 square foot business, I think it's about $2.7 million in gross sales. And then if you have like a 5% tax, it's about $135,000 in tax for that business. With regard to manufacturers and cultivators, that one's up in the air. We've gotten some very wide swings as far as revenue from anywhere from $2 million per year to up to $15 million a year. There's a lot of issues with regard to those, as how they cultivate, where they cultivate, I mean, what kind of systems they're using. Manufacturing runs the gamut from making food products to concentrates to oils to drinks. And so depending on what they're manufacturing, it could change and how large the facility is. If it's a smaller, I mean, it could be a manufacturing facility that fits in this room, or you could have a full warehouse-sized manufacturing facility. So it's difficult, but we are gathering more data as we go through the state. So it's once we have an idea, like the parameters of what the city is looking for, we can definitely narrow down those revenue numbers. But right now, the dispensary and the retail market is the one it's a little bit more defined, and that may change when recreation becomes legal in January because the prices will fluctuate up and down. And so as more dispensaries and it becomes more prevalent, right now the prices are probably not as high as they were 5 years ago, but they're probably going to be lower in another 5 years, so with more competition. So,
okay, great. And can you, what was your background again?
I work for the State Board of Equalization. I started off as an auditor but in 2005 I worked in our policy and legislative areas and worked for some of the board members, but basically an analytical research person. I've done revenue estimates for the state and since 2005 on cannabis industry.
I was just going to follow up, and I don't know if you can answer this question, and maybe it's a question we ask of some of our counterparts in Sacramento, but the governor has the Office of Business and Economic Development, and there they receive a lot of different prospective leads for commercial and industrial development. Those are leads that they share with necessary municipalities, wherever that site selector is looking. And I was just interested to see at one point does GoBiz start sharing leads for marijuana users or not users necessarily, but projects, so to speak, to get an idea as to what some of these requirements are, what the water facilities may be, or because I feel like there's a huge demand out there somewhere, but we haven't seen a whole lot of projects really peak up and to really bite off of what.
Correct, and I'm not sure if the governor's office will start providing that kind of information. Actually, Muniservices has that availability for some industry segments. But as far as the cannabis, and I've talked to a lot of different, just a couple of weeks ago I was in a presentation where we met, there's a lot of new industry groups popping up, and one of them is real estate. And so there's some firms out there that basically all they do is focus on cannabis property. And so they're trying to mix and match and fix people up with the areas that would meet their demands. But again, like in certain areas, the generally, when they start talking about cannabis in a city or an area, real estate prices will start going up. The speculators will come in and start buying the warehouse space or the other spaces, or trying to lease it out to just anticipation, even if it's vacant for a couple of years, hoping that the industry will eventually come to that jurisdiction. So as far as speculation and providing that information, I mean, there's a number of different associations, cannabis associations, and I'm sure they're more than happy to, I mean, we work with them and we can provide information. So if you're looking for who would be interested in your city? Is that what you're looking for? Is what kind of?
I'm just interested as to who's looking around. I mean, what is it, 10,000 square feet or 100,000 square feet or a million?
It depends, yeah. Well, right now there's some limitations on like very large cultivation sites that the state has put some like a limitation on for the next 5 years that it can't be over. I don't have the number in front of me. I'm sorry, I don't have that. But it's a very large cultivation site, like 100,000 square feet. But what we've heard is that some businesses are trying to circumvent by that coming in. They'll rent the whole, or one group will rent the whole warehouse, and then they'll subdivide it into, out to smaller grows. So with regard to your question, it's like wineries and the beer industry now. So basically you've got microbrews all the way up to the very large ones. In the cannabis industry, you're going to have that same type of environment. So you might have somebody who might only want a room this size for their manufacturing process. It'll be a bit like a boutique type operation where you're going to want somebody who's going to be more commercialized and they're going to want a bigger one. So I think if you have availability within this industry, and if you're allowing it, somebody will meet your demand. Someone will find a way to work with what property you have available.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. My question is, with land compatibility being a possible issue in several cities, if not our own, are there any examples in your line of work that maybe you might be able to give some tangible examples in the cultivation or manufacturing of cannabis where they comply with environmental issues? What are they doing to dispose of their wastes? What are they doing to comply with water rights and water rates? That's a huge thing here in our city.
Right, and that's where the Department of Food and Ag is getting involved. They're the ones who are developing the state-level regulations for pesticide requirements, the waste requirements, and those type of things. They're going to have regulations in place that will limit what the industry can develop and how they have to properly dispose of that waste. And then the city could also build off of that as they move forward to make sure that you're addressing those same issues. Water issue for cultivation is a big issue, and even maybe manufacturing. But I don't think it's as big as it used to be, because some of the cultivating facilities I've seen recently, they're becoming very high tech, where they're conserving a lot of water. They're reusing their water. They're using instead of just plants like it used to be like hydroponic type growing, where you just have a vat of water. Now they're using like clay pellets that absorb a small amount of water and hold it, and then they recycle those clay pellets as they go forward. So they're actually becoming very efficient in their use. Another issue that we mentioned is lighting. One thing that we consider is talking about before you allow this is to talk to your energy providers, your water and your light and power, to make sure that those areas can handle that. And that's where you come in with your building inspection, your public safety, to make sure whatever they're putting in, the system can handle that kind of lighting requirements for grow, because now they're growing. An outdoor grow is one a year for the most part. If you have a greenhouse, you get a little bit more, but some of the indoor grows we're seeing, they're trying to get 6 grows a year within those facilities. So it's constantly where it's basically lights on 12 hours, lights off 12 hours, and back on and back on. So, but the state is looking at trying to address those issues, and I think as they move forward, like I say, a lot of these businesses, especially the ones who want to be good partners, they'll come in and address those concerns, and you might be surprised as the technology and the information they have to mitigate some of those issues, because they want to be here.
Realistically, how far are we from the state handing down any of those decisions? Is this a sort of a moving piece in the
their plan is to have the initial set of regulations out. They've already sent out a set of regulations for preliminary review, and that came out, and so we've made comments on those. They've gone back to them. They expect to have at least the medicinal components done by the end of this year. And the recreational probably won't be done by the end of this year, but they're coming up with plans to allow temporary permits to be issued for facilities that are already operating within a jurisdiction that has approval from that jurisdiction and has proven to be a good business partner, and the city has to basically sign off on it to say, because there's a lot of medicinals that are going to transfer to recreational or become like a both medicinal and recreational as of January 1st. So there are some jurisdictions that have already modified their codes and regulations to allow recreational as of January 1st. And so it's going to be a little bit of a process, but the state is getting closer. But realistically, probably it won't be until mid next year that they have the full ordinances or regulations finalized and approved, probably.
Does that mean there's any speculation that any of these, let's say immediate manufacturers, could they get grandfathered in if the state continues just to reissue different codes, different compliances, and different?
So a manufacturer operating, and then so if they're a manufacturer operating in their jurisdiction, they can apply for that temporary permit, and they'll continue to probably get that temporary until the state comes, as long as the local jurisdiction continues to.
It rides heavily on the local jurisdiction.
Yeah, that both with the medicinal and the recreational, the locals still have the final say-so as far as what can operate in that jurisdiction. There is a little difference, between the medicinal and the gray area. The medicinal says the state can't issue a permit unless the locals have already issued that permit. With regard to recreational, and so one thing we're trying to get changed, it says that the state can't issue a permit if the locals specifically prohibit it. So there's no exchange of information between the city and the state. The state at one point was not even allowed to talk to the city and ask for that information. So I think that's been modified a little bit, and we're trying to get that fixed in the regulations to make sure that there still can be a communication between the state and the local to make sure that the state's not issuing a permit if the locals do not want it in their jurisdiction. So that should be resolved. But if there's an industry that's currently operating as a medicinal, they can continue operating as a medicinal. And because the issue is even if you're operating as a manufacturer, it doesn't really become medicinal until it actually goes to the patient. So the product isn't medicinal or recreational as it's being produced. The edibles and the juices and the oils are all just cannabis products. So it becomes medicinal when actually the customer comes in and provides the card and says this is for medicinal. Compared to
how far is this away from being categorized as an agricultural product? Is that a fight that's being?
I'm not sure. I think until the feds actually change their ruling on it, I don't think there's. I think, and now that we have food and ag involved, I think it's getting closer in the state, and they are trying to regulate the activity. They're going to be looking at the pesticides. You'll be coming out with people who are going to have organic cannabis. I mean, so you're going to have different. So it's getting closer, but a full ag product probably not until the feds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Rigby.
If I may ask a couple leading questions, Mayor Pro
Surely.
Tem. All right, one of my counterparts in another city describes this as an industry that is flush with cash, that the industry is fully capable of paying for the implementation and regulatory cost of a city, and the upside is employment and taxes on the product itself. How does that fit with your knowledge of this industry?
The industry is flush with cash to a certain extent. I mean, there are some venture capitalists out there that are putting money into some of the larger operations. Where we're seeing it is not quite that way as where you have, in some jurisdictions, there is, like I said, the industry's been operating within the jurisdiction for years and years and years. I mean, so you probably have black market growers that are going back generations in this area.
Might be one or two,
Yeah. So what the issue is some jurisdictions have had some concerns where the locals want to participate because they have been participating. Now they want to come forward and participate legally. If the fees are so high, they can't participate, and it just pushes them out of the market. So you more have a corporate entity as compared to a more local mom-and-pop type activity. So there's both sides of that. The other side of that is also with regard to the cash. Probably 5 years ago, because there were less jurisdictions that allowed cannabis, so whatever that they were charging for their application fees or taxes or anything else, the industry was willing to pay. Now that the industry has become more prevalent throughout the state, they can pick and choose a little bit more as far as where they want to go and where they want to operate. So if the fees are very high, then they may decide to go to a neighboring jurisdiction and pull the money over there. I've heard from various different cities that they started off with some very high fees, and now they're maybe adjusting those for the taxes. They're adjusting the taxes. They start with a higher tax base. I mean, I think on average right now it's probably about 4 or 5%. There are some as low as 2%. There was one that's looking at, I think, 18%, and they're just it's an evolving market, so that's why we say you need to be flexible with whatever you decide to do. So if things change, you can adjust the tax rates up and down, or you can adjust the fees to meet your requirements to make sure that the industry that you want stays in your jurisdiction.
Like everything else, it's a competitive environment, market-driven.
It will be.
There are very few standalone industries. You get a new industry in town, it usually brings something else with it. There's some spin-offs. What might the city expect if the council proceeds with the approval of a cannabis ordinance?
You did mention earlier, there's as far as other industries or other activities, it's hard to say as far as exactly what comes along with them, because there's already like smoke shops and things that have some of the products that are used in the cannabis industry. It's not hard to find. They're not bringing anything new that's not already here already, so that's sort of hard to define. Is where it might just what you're looking at is taking something that's currently in the black market and moving it into a permitized activity. So that's, I think, where you're going to see a shift from with regard to the industry. But like you mentioned, it does bring employment, because that's some of the things you can regulate and you can use in your scoring process to make sure that they're going to hire locally, that they're going to provide some kind of feedback or incentive back to the city, provide money for programs or things like that. So you can ensure that you try to get an industry that comes in that's going to fit in with your city and also contribute to the city in the long run, not just with the fees or the taxes, but other activities also.
And if the council were to pursue a cannabis ordinance, what do next steps look like? What role does a company like yours play in that process? We have a small staff. We have a lot of priorities. There would certainly be a need for an external component. Visit with the council about what that might look like, please.
Sure. One of the things that we're doing for a lot of cities that are just starting off and looking at it, and some are a little bit farther along than, there's a couple of cities that have already passed taxes and already starting to review the applications, but they didn't even look at their internal costs or resources to develop to see what was going to cost them. So we've developed like a resource study that basically goes back, and we've talked to the police department, the fire department, the various different agencies, identified various different staffing levels, and then we go through and put together a matrix of the various different the time and costs involved in going through that process, from initially developing the application process to the implementation of the review process, and going through that and documenting all the various different hours in time, and then we work with them to basically come up with an idea of what their actual costs will be, whether it's going to be internal using staff or an outside consultant hours to perform those duties. And so you can come up with basically an initial implementation cost that you can pass on to the industry to actually just even apply for the application. Then you have ongoing costs that include inspections, oversight, enforcements, audits, those type of things. You identify those costs, and then you could basically identify those annual costs. Some cities are doing it from a standpoint where it's just a straight fee they can adjust on a regular basis, or they've done it on a deposit basis, where basically they require the business to submit a deposit for a certain amount of money, and if the resources or the cost to administer that come below or above, there's an adjustment to that deposit. And there's also a component where you can do that we've seen and we've encouraged that instead of identifying all the different activities, you can also have those basic activities, and then you have an hourly fee on top of that. So if you're a good business partner and you're working along with everything, you're probably going to hit this lower level of the fee and you'll be fine. But if there's additional work that needs to be done based on enforcement activities or financial audits or things, then you basically charge them on an hourly basis to recoup your cost for those activities. The other thing we look at is community involvement. What does the community want? What does everybody? We've gone to city council meetings where they thought everything was fine, and the community would totally embrace the industry. We got there, and there was an overflow crowd to opposing it. And so then they came back, now we need to rethink what we want to do. So there's a lot of outreach. And then you look at your city, the zoning. What can you actually allow? One city we went to, and they said, we're looking at manufacturing. Well, what do you have available? Well, we've got this old food warehouse plant. Well, that's within a couple hundred feet of a school, daycare center, church. Well, that won't work because it falls within that parameter. So you've got to sort of outline your zoning maps to find out what areas would meet those demands, and then also, as mentioned before, is what the industry is looking for as far as what they want for the industry. If it's a manufacturing or distribution, they're going to want to make sure that there's transportation availability to in and out and other infrastructures that are available for them to operate. So there's a number of steps, but basically we don't encourage. There's nothing that needs to be done by January 1st by any jurisdiction to meet the requirements of the state or the industry, but we do encourage a good process to go through to evaluate all the issues and the concerns and address those as you move forward, because I think it's much easier down the road if you've already addressed those issues and those concerns and you're ready to go out and...
Would I also correctly assume that Muniservices provides assistance in ordinance preparation?
Yes, we do.
And audits of these kinds of activities?
Yes, we have an audit team that's performed audits throughout the state. They're working in Sacramento. They're actually starting in Santa Barbara, Cathedral City, Palm Springs, that do basically financial and compliance audits, because it's not just a dollar amount. And the audits are a little bit different. I have an audit background with the state, and dealing with those audits, we had to come up with various different methodology, because it is a cash-based business, and basically if it's a cash-based business, I can guarantee that their records will match their returns. I mean, because they can adjust any way they want. There's no inventory control. There's no supply chain. That will change a little bit next year when more of them get permitized. But walking into a dispensary and the owner telling me, oh, I can tell you where every garbage bag of cannabis came from, as an auditor, that just raises concerns for me. They say, well, how do I know you can do that? And they have the state's going to issue a track and trace system or implement, but it's a manual input system. So the small plant gets tagged, and then as it matures and changes, they put a new tag on it and they scan it. Well, it's a manual input, and from an audit perspective, again, there's areas where manual adjustments can be made to that system. So we've developed processes to audit these industries, to evaluate their cash and look beyond just their books and records to verify that they've actually reporting and the taxes that they should be.
And all of those costs would obviously need to be included in the city's fee recovery system.
Correct.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Tooley. Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gallegos. Larry, thank you for that presentation. First of all, let me ask, now, you had mentioned earlier that about potential clients. Do you match them to a specific city based on their demand, or whether they want to have dispensaries, commercial, what have you? Is that something that your services provide?
Yes, we do. We don't have a preference one way or the other, whether the industry is allowed or not, but depending on what the city wants to go, we have the resources to provide assistance to all the various different categories and components of the business.
And would you care to provide maybe or shed some light on some potential cities that you work with that are currently operating or will be operating here shortly?
We're working in a number of cities. In the Bay Area, we have Millbrae, Redwood City. We're doing work in Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo. We've done some work in Modesto. I don't have all of them on top of my head.
The reason why I ask is because you did show us some of those numbers, especially percentages of what's going on in here in Madera and the county. Would you say that's pretty similar in the Central Valley as far as with the Prop 64?
We haven't done an analysis for all those different areas, but I do know, like in the Bay Area, the vote swing is differently in some of in the Bay Area and probably in Los Angeles compared to the Central Valley. I think it's probably pretty consistent especially for Madera. Maybe when you get into Fresno and some other areas, it might go a little bit closer, but for the Central Valley cities, it's probably pretty close. I come from Yuba City up above Sacramento, and I know that's very similar to what we had.
And I see that only with the exception of very few cities here in the valley, Coalinga being one of them, of course, Hanford was another one that was in the spotlight not too long ago. But I think this gives us a good opportunity here in the valley to explore at least, or have something prepared, so that if the council does decide to go forward, at least we have, like you mentioned earlier, have all of our ducks in line so that we can be prepared to accept any applications and permits and what have you. Now, I know you mentioned something about licensing and ordinances, so we don't have to have our ordinance in play before January 1st of 2018, right?
Correct. The only thing that we're recommending to cities that if they choose to initially ban recreational cannabis, that the ordinances have to specifically say that you're prohibiting recreational cannabis. And if your ordinance, and I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to review them in detail before I came, but prior, when it was only medicinal that was allowed, a lot of cities and counties basically just said we prohibit medicinal cannabis. So we recommend we'll just take out medicinal and just say we prohibit cannabis, commercial cannabis activities. If that's in place, then there's nothing that you would need to do as of January 1st.
through the chair, ours doesn't refer solely to medicinal. It's,
Okay.
it's actually an outright ban.
Yeah. So there's nothing you would need to do as of January 1st.
Perfect. And as far as if this was to be taxed commercially, then I don't know if it have to go to the taxpayers. Is that something that your services would be prepared to do as well and help the city with that?
Yes. Yes.
And providing the information, educating our taxpayers and voters, for that matter.
Correct. That's what we would recommend is you have some outreach in public sessions such as this, and also evaluating the surrounding jurisdiction, the different tax rates, and trying to identify a tax rate that would be good for your city to make sure that you're receiving the revenue. Because the idea is trying to, as you become commercial and assess taxes, you're trying to pull it from the black market to the legal market, and so you want to make sure that that's being done. And so that's where selecting that tax rate is very important, is for identifying that nice spot where the rate should be, but with some flexibility so you can go up or down depending on what's going on.
And I'm assuming that this is something that you've done in cities in the Bay where they had to go through a similar process, and that's the services that you provide, correct?
Correct. We've been brought on board in various different levels of the process where they're starting from scratch, or we've been brought in where they've already passed the tax portion, but they don't. Now they're going to try to. There's one city where they passed the tax, and now they're trying to implement the dispensaries or get that approved through the city council. So the tax is approved, but the actually business activities weren't approved, and so we've come in various different stages of that, and we can look at where. Depending on where we're at and where you want to go. We view ourselves as more of a team member. We don't have a one-size-fits-all. We basically, because that's not possible in this industry, so we rely on you to give us some direction of where you want to go, and then we help you get to where you want to be.
And what kind of challenges would you see, especially with the numbers that you presented to us with our, regarding the Prop 64, would you see?
That's just one number that was out there, and that was a year ago. And a lot of people who vote for things, and in a lot of areas, even we've seen it the other side of it, where the city has overwhelmingly passed Prop 64. But when you talk to the residents, it's like, well, yeah, I passed it, but I don't want it in my backyard. And so you've got that issue. So you have to look at the full area of the city, where you can place it. Some have a lot of areas. One city, we're a very small city, we're looking at, they may only have one or two dispensaries because they don't have the resources for a large one. So you have to sort of temper the expectations of the city of what they might have. And so it varies depending on where you go. So it just depends on what you have available, what kind of industry you would welcome into the community, what industry the community will welcome in. There's a group here, but I think as you move forward, you might get more input from both pro and con for the industry. But I think that's also very important to go through the process and take the steps and the time to go through it to make sure that you're not getting blindsided at the end.
Yeah. And last question here, Larry, is that you brought up a good point in regards to the black market, and I keep on hearing this over and over. But, the city obviously is like a business. We take revenues in, expenditures out. But would you say that a city based on this black market is really leaving out a lot of revenue out there that could potentially help mitigate for some of the services that we have to use in relation to this industry?
Yes, because on one of the slides I mentioned that even if you ban completely, there's a lot of costs involved in the existing cannabis market within the city, even if there's no commercial authorized. Black markets out there, you're still going to have the DUIs, you're still going to have the youth problems, you're going to have the public intoxication, and the other health and safety issues with regard to the illegal cultivations and those type of things that you're expending resources on, but you're not getting any benefit back. So but there is a level that you want to make sure that if you go too high on one side with the fees and taxes, the black market's already operating, they're going to stay there. So you got to find that level where you can eventually, slowly start. If you bring in good businesses, because like I said, it's a market-based economy. So one city we were working in, they were adamant they want to be the first one to have a dispensary in their jurisdiction. Didn't matter what happened, they want to be the first one. There were some issues, but the other part of that is if another jurisdiction next door opens a dispensary, it's not going to be between the cities of which one survives or not. It's going to be a business decision based on who's a better business operator, who are the customers going to, what kind of products do they provide, what are their pricing levels. Those are all going to impact how the businesses survive and operate. And if you do welcome the industry into your jurisdiction, you want to make sure that they are profitable and are operating, because like any other business, if it's a business that's not surviving and having issues, that's where you have the problems from the financial and from the enforcement side, because they start cutting corners and doing things they shouldn't be doing just to maintain that profit or paying themselves, and then you have issues. So there are some, I think you are leaving some tax on the table and fees out there if it's not there. But again, it's not going to be to the level that we've heard from other cities, and it's not going to be a silver bullet to fix all your ails. You'll cover your costs. You might be having some additional money, but it's not going to be. Initially, it's not going to be something that's going to be able to. You're going to have a lot of revenue and excess that you're going to be able to utilize for other activities.
Nonetheless, we can both agree that regardless whether we accept it or not, you're still going to have that growing service demand, because now that it's legal, you talked about earlier whether a neighbor wants his neighbor having it in the backyard or not, or whether they're doing it legally or not. We as a city might be leaving out a lot of money on the table.
Correct.
So, well, thank you again, Larry. Appreciate that presentation.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. Councilman Robertson.
Yes, I was wondering, like if the market gets so saturated, with many cities having, a cannabis retail and wholesale, that, is boom and bust. And then I saw a report about Colorado State. They said, since they legalized recreational cannabis, that they have more homelessness, more traffic accidents, more crime, and property value decline.
Yes, and that is an issue, and I always warn people when they look at reports, you always have to look at who's developing the report, because the proponents are going to make the industry look very rosy. The opponents are going to make the industry look very bad. So there's somewhere in the middle. You sort of have to look at it and decide for yourself what you believe, but there are reports that those things have happened in Colorado. We haven't really heard much what's going on in Washington as far as the long-term impacts that's going on, but it will. More states are allowing it. More cities and counties are allowing it. So I think the industry will look much different. I think in 10 years we'll all come back and say, well, why did we? It's now just like a regular business on the corner and operating. If that's what happens if the feds allow it, we'll maybe wonder what we were doing. Why we spent. It was such an issue, but it is an issue for now. But those are things that you have to weigh as far as making your decisions of what you want to allow as far as the industry in your jurisdiction, as far as what the impacts are. So a retail dispensary location will have different impacts than a cultivation, but the cultivation, if you're worried about the water, the waste, and the outdoor components, that's different than a manufacturing. And so that's where there's so many different components now that you can pick and choose as far as what you want to allow and what's right for your jurisdiction and what those impacts might be.
Yeah, because like in Amsterdam, I think they're trying to. Did they ban, the pot restaurants?
Well, yeah, the smoke shops or the coffee. I've never been to Amsterdam, so I'm sorry, but either the coffee shops or the smoke shops are basically. It's not technically legal in Amsterdam, but there's no enforcement in those jurisdictions.
Well, I've been there, and they're all the way around the blocks,
Right.
Around the cathedral.
And it also comes back to what you want to enforce and what you're looking at doing. And so, there's some that are a little bit more, even with the medicinal for years, there are jurisdictions that we've gone on to that they've said, oh, no, we know we have an illegal dispensary operating in the city, and it's been operating for 10 years, but it's never been an issue for us, and so we've just sort of not enforced it.
Thank you.
Councilman Rodriguez.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, but I do want to just add on to that comment. And, I did also look at some of the reports in Colorado, and I must say that, this industry is no different than tobacco and liquor. Obviously, we talked about homelessness earlier, and a big part of that, people that suffer depression, they go out and they look for something. Alcohol is the biggest thing that they reach out for. A lot of different accidents related to alcohol. Can't say that for tobacco, but there's other related illnesses with that as well. It's an industry. In regards to the reports that are out there with the opponents of it, obviously you've seen that marijuana related doesn't necessarily mean that it was caused by marijuana. That little word itself, related, just means that somehow in their blood they tested for that, but that wasn't the cause of the accident. So I just want to let my colleagues know and also the public know that, this is an industry that is not regulated like the liquor or tobacco, but essentially will get to that point. And I'm sure with it comes certain, obviously there's certain consequences, but there's also positive and negative impacts to that. So I just thought I shed that light there. So thanks
I agree
again.
completely.
Mayor Pro Tem, just as a quick point of reference for the council, you recall we did send one of our police officers to Colorado. Your third and final installment on your workshops, we'll give you a report on our evaluation of the Colorado experience. It's a little different than what I expected.
Okay, great. Great questions from my council members tonight. I would like to thank Mr. Bergkamp for coming and giving us some education on this issue.
Thank you very much.
I truly appreciate it. And bringing your wife. Thank you for
no.
coming. Oh, colleagues. Thank you. Excuse me.
Close enough.
Spent all time together, but.
Okay, moving on to consent calendars. Are there any items on the consent calendar that my council members would like to have pulled for further discussion?
Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to pull item B5 for further discussion, please.
And I would like to pull B1. Any others? I need a motion.
Mayor Pro Tem, you said you wanted to pull B1?
B1.
And was that?
That would be.
Which one, A or B? Was it?
B1B, sorry.
Okay.
Excuse me,
Just
B1B.
for clarification.
B1B.
I move to approve the consent calendar excluding item B1B and B5.
It's been motioned. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion's been passed unanimously. I'll start with B1B, and I need an action in regards to the MPFA minutes.
That's correct. We'd like to take the vote separate on that since it is the authority board.
Okay. So I need an action for that?
That's correct.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rigby. Seconded by Councilman Oliver. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. B5, Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The question that I had was in regards to the jobs that we're trying, the employments or the positions that we're trying to bring by with this staffing company. And my question is, in the past, how hard has it been for the city to try to get these employees, or I don't know what, or the pool of employees to be certified? And why has it taken us this long for us to have, did we have vacancies in the past in these certain positions that we have now? Or is it something that we now have to be certified with these employees?
The positions that we're talking about
Correct.
are all certified.
Correct.
In water and wastewater. There are two different types of certification. The wastewater is harder to find people in the industry. We've tried to internally recruit. A lot of our staff was internally recruited and trained, but we've had problems continuing that process. Our recruitments are open internal as well as external. We have one employee who was hired and just simply couldn't become certified after several attempts. So it does take some effort, some skill sets. That's why when we screened the current operators in training, it was with an eye towards finding those people who have the capacity to pass that test. Basically, to become certified, you have to do two things. You have to first register to the state, and then when you register, you have to have a certain amount of educational units, courses in either sciences or water treatment, et cetera. And it's fairly low, but you have to have some. I think it's like 6 units or so. So you have to have some academic capacity. Once you register with state, you have to do two things. You have to pass a certification test, and you can do that day one, or you can do it later, because until you have 2,000 hours working at a plant as a trainee, you can't be certified. So it is not for everybody. The working environment's not real pleasant sometimes. It's a very arduous job, so it is hard to recruit people and retain people. So we've constantly been working at that. We've gone through many cycles, as we talked about in the staff report, trying to fill those positions. So we've trying to in order to sort of still be able to get the resources to get the job done, we've taken two approaches. We're continuing with operators in training, trying to train up our own, and then where we still need to get the work done, we're using this to backfill until we can get certified. The temp services should be just that, temp. This is not an effort to outsource our job market. We want to internalize that. We want to retain that skill sets and that institutional knowledge, and hopefully retain those people. But it's a very, very competitive market.
Yeah, I'm assuming that in this case we don't have a pool of candidates within our community, and these could come from other places if they don't have that type of certification or hours in the industry.
For the most part, yeah. There's not too many local. We've had in one case we've had an applicant from within our community, but compensation was better elsewhere, so he didn't take the position. What can we say?
And would that be one of the problems that we struggle with, is possibly the comparable pay, maybe? Or is it more of just a tedious job, or just something that people don't want to do? Or
I think it'd probably be better if Mr. Tooley or maybe our personnel department speak to that. They're a little more expert on the subject.
Through the chair, I'll provide a partial answer, and Wendy may want to chime in. I spent a considerable amount of time at the plant, and some of the feedback I'm getting from the operators, our most senior operators who know their industry, they're telling me that about twice as many grade 3 operators are retiring as are entering the industry. So this is a classic supply and demand issue, where there are fewer grade 3 operators available, and obviously the competition is going to be significant. That's an operational issue that we're going to have to address. Wendy, what can you add to that discussion?
The hiring at the trainee level is one way to bring more into the industry, and that's one of the avenues we're addressing it. But as Dave says, it does take time, because there are educational components and hours work components to go through each level. So even once you get your 1, you're still only a 1 until you get the right number of hours and the right amount of education to get to a 2 and pass that test and then get to a 3. Once you're at the 3, you can move wherever you want in this industry. You can work, we're losing some to the state prison system. You can work pretty much in any system throughout California, and there's some that 3 is the max you have to have. Part of what we're dealing with as well is we need those higher level operators, but someone who's been a 2 or 3 to get all those hours and all those certifications has worked in the industry a long time. They're topped out where they're at. We do not have the ability under the personnel rules, without taking council action, to go beyond the middle of our pay range. So what we've talked about internally is the potential that we may have to invoke that personnel rule that says this goes to council, so that if you're hiring a senior person that's been in another city for 20 years, they're not going to come and work for you for A or B step. It's just not going to happen. Additionally, when we do compensation, and that's a bargaining unit issue, but where we've placed ourselves in the market is at market median. And so we're in the middle of the market. We're relatively even when I look at total compensation in the immediate surrounding area. But because the industry has a shortage, it means that we have to work really hard to get those 2s and 3s to look at Madera as a place of employment.
Thank you, Wendy. So at this moment, then, I'm assuming that this is why we're using this temp, is so that we can fill in those positions within once they reach the level that they need to get their certification, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct, council member. In all instances, we greatly prefer not to hire temporary services, but to engage full-time employment.
Yes, and the only reason why is because you mentioned that word temp, because in the need that we do need these positions filled, and how long can we carry these temp positions? And I see the agreement. I noticed that if IT Solutions doesn't pick that up, then we also have that other agreement with the water talent. And I'm assuming that between both of them, this is where we're going to try to get our pool of candidates, correct?
Through the chair, council member, we'll take candidates wherever we can get them. The purpose of the agreement simply is to provide the temporary services.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Oliver.
Real quickly, and I had an opportunity to connect with Wendy on this item earlier today. And Wendy, can we share how many folks we have in the pipeline as far as the operator in training? And then also maybe speak to the balance that's required by the state as to the number of operators in training compared to the number of senior operators that you can have in your particular department?
Okay, I can tell you what I know, and Dave can fill in the blanks. We do have 2 operator in trainings. David and I actually both signed off on the final application packets today. So right now, all it is getting back to them. They can give notice at their current job and getting a start date lined up. So we'll have 2 OITs coming on. As I discussed with Councilmember Oliver this morning, while it would be great to hire a whole bunch of OITs, the state has mandates on us as far as who can be at the plant at any given time. 1, an OIT, an operator in training, cannot be unaccompanied. They have to be with a certified operator. 2, we have to have, I believe it's a grade 3 at all times that we have staff on site, a minimum of a grade 3. So even though we have existing employees with their 1s and 2s, they can't be there without a 3. So then you have a situation where maybe you only have, at one point when we had some back-to-back retirements, 2 people with high enough grade, maybe 3 people, and they're working 14 days straight. And you can't have that because it's not safe. So that's where the temporary services come in, so we can bring in those higher level certifications to help give our staff that rest period to keep everybody going.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Oliver. I have a question. IT Solutions is able to get us bodies to take these positions. How come we can't hire the people that are applying for this temp agency to come help us in positions that we have, if they have those qualifications?
Well, there's 2 parts to that. We can hire them. We're not excluded from hiring their temps. We made sure that provision wasn't there. We don't have to buy them out. We can, if they want to come to work for us full time, great. IT temp is our IT Solutions, is well known for doing a lot of temp services, but not so much in this field. This is sort of a new foray into this field. It is yet to be seen whether or not they can actually produce people at these pay rates. There's a significant difference between their rates and water talent's rates. But we always are looking for the best deal. But in this situation, by having 2 contracts, if the lower bidder can't provide, then we can move on to the next highest price.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I may add to the conversation too, one of the advantages of a temporary service is that we get people with a tryout. We're looking not only for people who bring the skill sets, but who are also a good match for the rest of the team. And that's part of the conversation I had, in fact, with our plant manager this morning. Was we talked about how important the team is in finding the right match for that. So to answer your question directly, when we find that right match, we're going after someone.
One last question. If we still can't find temps to take these positions, we have past employees that are retired from our city. Could we do a consulting with them if we get into a crunch where we don't have the coverage out there or the knowledge?
The short answer is yes. There are some limitations with regard to PERS retirement, but to the extent that they would be available, Wendy, again, I'd invite you to add to the conversation, but I think that would be an important strategy to explore.
It's potential. There's hours limits on retired annuitants if they don't want to affect their pension income. Additionally, a lot of our recent retirees have actually moved out of state. And so I'm sure there are retirees in the state, and CalPERS, especially when it's a position that requires specialty certifications, they're a little bit more lenient about it because it still only can be a temporary solution. We can't have a retired annuitant that works for us year after year after year and just hits their 960 max and calls it good to supplement their retirement. But it's potential.
Because we have done it at the Madera Unified School District. We brought back people to help consult us when we're in a jam, and every year they can only work for us for so long, so many hours, and we realize that, but the background they have to give us is just, it's a wonderful trade-off. Mm-hmm. Any other questions from my colleagues?
Move to approve item B5.
Second.
In a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I would like to ask my colleagues if we can move D2 to right now. We have Supervisor Rogers that's been waiting patiently, and we still have a ways to go, and we are now looking at a little over an hour and a half, if that is okay.
That's good for me. Yep.
Brent, do I need to do anything different to move that up?
You're the boss.
To your
Okay.
meeting.
Then at this time, I'd like to call Supervisor Dave Rogers up.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you here tonight and to see you all in action, my colleagues and friends, and grappling with many serious issues as all cities and counties are doing these days. And may God grant you wisdom in all of your deliberations. What do we have before us tonight is a request. And I have brought with me some resources that I can pass on to staff. There will be some sample letters in here and some information about Temperance Flat Dam. Temperance Flat Dam, to just give you a brief description, is in the upper reaches of the Millerton Lake area. The current storage of Millerton Lake and Friant Dam is 520,000 acre feet. And that adding Temperance Flat Dam will add to the storage capacity of the system 1.27 million acre feet, bringing the totals to somewhere near 1.8 million acre feet. The logic behind putting in the dam began actually in the inception of the original project of Friant Dam. Before Friant Dam was built, the actual site under consideration was Temperance Flat. That was changed, however, due to the convenience of the gravity flow system that would have been developed through the Madera Friant Kern canals. And so the Millerton Lake, the Friant Dam was built instead in 1937, began in 1937. Some of my relatives actually had a part in that. My great uncle Iris Wood and his brother Doyle and Alexander Wood, my great grandfather. And I bring that up because I feel like I'm standing in their shoes today in a different time with the same problem, a lack of resource that is necessary for life. And water is life. And what we have is a condition where we are overdrafting our groundwater in Madera County to the tune of about 200,000 acre feet every year. The Temperance Flat system would capture flood runoff. And by the way, the annual average flood releases every year, and I'm just talking about flood releases, so that concept needs to kind of permeate our brains a little bit. There are natural flows, and then there are flood releases. And the average annual flood release at Temperance Flat is 500,000 acre feet every year. That means for the last 30 years, we've released enough water to stretch from sea to shining sea, and then out to sea another 200 miles. Imagine that. I'm talking from the Atlantic to the Pacific and then out to sea another 200 miles. And that would be 160 foot deep, 300 foot wide. That would be the largest river you've ever seen, or the world has ever seen for that matter. And think of all that water that could have gone into the groundwater aquifer. That would have actually eliminated the subsidence that we're seeing now, where the ground is sinking beneath our feet, as it did between 1937 and 1955. In Mendota, it sank 28 feet. We have subsidence on the San Joaquin River itself right now due to the lack of surface water delivery in our region. Sac Dam has actually sunk about 2 feet. A serious condition that, if allowed to persist, can lead to the actual demise of the San Joaquin River itself. It will cease to be a river and lose its outlet, and as a result, when part of the river gets lower than the outlet, you no longer have gravity flow. You have a lake situation, which will consume thousands of agricultural acres and residents in our region. Valuable land. And so the preservation of that water, the flood releases alone, would mean groundwater recharge in a significant amount for our region. And not only for our region, but for the regions to the south of us and to the north of us. Our partners in this, we have a very broad coalition. 5 counties, Merced, Madera, Fresno, Kings, and Tulare. And many of those counties don't stand to get a lot of water out of this. But what they do understand that many people don't is that when their partners receive their allocation, what do you call it? The
irrigation districts.
I'm trying to think of the contractors, the water contractors. When they see their allocation, then we will also receive ours on this end. What has happened in the past is that they have actual 1913 water rights on the river. As long as they receive their allocation from the from the CVP, Central Valley Water Project, our contractors can receive theirs. Our area recipients of water receive theirs. And what has happened is that when their allocation has been taken away, they make their claim on the San Joaquin River, and we lose our water. And that's what happened over the last 3 years, previous to the good rain and water conditions we had this year. We actually lost our ability to receive that water. Long story short, Temperance Flat Dam means life, jobs, future. It means a continuance of agriculture. It means many things to this region, including recreation and all of the things that go with a nice water storage facility. It's really a very great project. And as I said, not only do we have 5 counties, I failed to mention that we also have a number of disadvantaged communities involved in the project as well that sit on the board. We have representatives from large cities and small cities, from the west side, the east side, and everything in between. We have the tribe also involved, and water agencies involved. And so we have a broad coalition. And the unique thing about this is that the support is so wide, it's so broad. We've never in history have we seen something overcome the political boundaries, and all of the other boundaries that might be out there, to bring people together to support something so important for our region. It means great things for our community, and I hope that you will find in your heart to send a letter of support, and include in your letter, if you would, if you decide to send one, the nature of and the demographics of Madera and what this means to your region, and the jobs that would be lost without the water. And you know, as I said, water is life. And you know, we came together on this knowing and looking to the future and realizing that if we didn't do something now, we could end up with ghost towns in the region, because without water, that's exactly what you have, nothing. The value of our land, the value of our production, the value of the living that occurs here and the future for our children and their families is at stake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Rogers. One question. Any questions from my colleagues? Any discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering,
sure.
Do they have to get rid of the San Joaquin River Conservancy? Because they are there to ensure that the San Joaquin River produces more, salmon. They want to restore the salmon run.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had sat on that board, a year ago.
Sure.
And I was wondering what would happen, if they stop. Would they send the same amount of water down San Joaquin River?
What I understand is that the flows are about 50-50 for use for agriculture and cities, and then 50% supposed to be for the environment. But in recent years, that's actually the statistics have actually gone way up in favor of the environment, and it's been a kind of a lopsided thing, and so Temperance Flat actually balances that out a little bit more, I think, and it actually brings the opportunity for us to restore our groundwater like we need to. I don't believe you're going to find a situation where you're going to get rid of the Conservancy or of the attempt to restore the salmon. I think nature is going to take care of that somehow on its own, and one of the things that Temperance Flat does do for the environment is that it provides for a cooler stream. It's like putting more ice in the cup, as it were. You've got a cooler storage up here, and you release that water, and you keep a more continual flow, allows the water to stay cooler. Traditionally, the San Joaquin River has been a warm water fishery, and very difficult to restore salmon in. And I know they've spent a lot of money and having a very difficult time doing it. I'm not here to debate the merits of restoring salmon to the San Joaquin or of even the environmental components. I will say that we have put together an application, and I failed to mention this. I'm glad you brought this up. We have an application for Prop 1 funds, $1.3 billion. We have put that application in with the Water Commission. We're one of 12 applications that has been put in. We have a very strong application, and I believe as the evaluation of those applications goes on, you're going to find that we have an undeniable claim to some of that money, and that there is an undeniable value to the Temperance Flat Dam project. It's the only project with a feasibility study already completed, and the Bureau of Reclamation actually invested about $500,000, a little bit more than $500,000, in the finalization of for the application to the Water Commission. They'd like to see this built. On the Fed side, I think we're going to get big support there as well. If we get $1 billion, I'll be really happy. It'll mean jobs for the region. It'll mean storage and water, and then I believe the gap will be made up by investors. There'll be another component of this thing come down the pike once the state gets involved and invests part of that water bond in Temperance Flat, and it's very fair for our region to get a portion of that money, because this is the only project like this in the Central Valley area. I mean, the North has all their projects and all of their, they've got a myriad of water projects. This is our water project. This is the water project for the Central Valley, and it means a future for us. Thank you for that question.
You're welcome.
Councilman Oliver?
Councilman Robinson, I have the opportunity to serve on the San Joaquin River Conservancy Board. I don't think we're going anywhere anytime soon. We got some money to spend to acquire some land to make way for more restoration and recreation along the river. But I just want to say thank you, Supervisor Rogers, for joining us this evening and being patient and providing us your presentation. I think this would make sense to sign on to this effort and as with many initiatives throughout the Central Valley, it's important that we unify and leverage our voices to be heard. And certainly, as we've experienced, the years of perpetual drought have failed to evade us and will most likely return, sooner than later. And so it's important that as we move forward and look ahead, as we try to diversify our water portfolio, that we work with the region's partners to do so. And hopefully this project, if completed, and we hope that it will be one day, will help provide that infrastructure and will complement our efforts. So I want to thank you again for your leadership on this issue and for bringing this item to the council.
Thank you.
I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Thank you again for taking the time out this evening and hanging in there with us,
Very happy.
Supervisor
Thank you.
Rogers.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate your listening to what I had to say. I'm used to doing my business earlier in the day, and I was up at 5 this morning, so this is getting late for me. But I appreciate you taking me early. Thank you.
Got it. I need a motion for staff to prepare a letter for Mayor Medillin to sign on this.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a letter for
Mayor Pro Tem, if I may. I'm not sure if maybe I should ask the question earlier, but I didn't know if this was being brought before us today to sign on this letter. I just wanted to make sure that by signing this letter, are we implying that we will be part of this authority as well? I wasn't sure. Maybe I should ask you.
The San Joaquin Valley Water Infrastructure Authority is comprised of groups that represent, in fact, your city sits in I can't remember the name of it. It's a COG, I believe. You sit in a COG, and you have representatives of that COG. The COG was approached about having voting for representation on that on the San Joaquin Valley Water Infrastructure Authority, and they elected, I believe, 2 or 3 cities out of the COG that represent the majority of the cities: a small city, a large city, and kind of in between sizes, but mostly disadvantaged communities. This letter doesn't do anything as far as representation on the San Joaquin Valley Water Infrastructure Authority. What this would do is let the Water Commission and the governor know how important this project is to your region and how much you need it and support it. That's what the purpose of these letters are at this point. And many cities and counties and various organizations, including the AFL-CIO, we've had labor organizations, we've had farming organizations, we've had city organizations and unions and various groups sign on to supporting this. Like I say, it's such a broad coalition. I couldn't even remember all the organizations that signed on to it. There are opposition out there. There is some opposition, but I believe it's largely, I won't go into that, but when you look at the benefits, it just makes total sense when we're releasing flood releases of 500,000 acre feet a year. We want to capture that and put it in the ground. It makes sense.
Thank you, Supervisor Rogers. And the only reason why I asked is because I'll be very sincere with you. I don't know too much about the Temperance Flat Dam, and I don't know too much about the authority. So I don't know if this was something that I was going to sign on to, but I sure would like to have more information on it before I did. So that's why I brought up the question. I wasn't sure if that implies that we are becoming part of this authority and we'd have some type of monetary obligation to it as well.
No. The people, the entities that sit on the board and represent on the San Joaquin Valley Water Infrastructure Authority have a dues of $50,000 per year, and that dues allows them a voting right on the board. And the dues for the disadvantaged communities is paid by the collective, so they take up like an offering and help them with their collective dues. So,
thank you.
COG. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion on the.
Yeah, and I'm just through the chair, Mayor Pro Tem. I just clarifying Councilman Rodriguez's question that basically it's a letter of support. It's crafted in that manner. It would not have any binding authority on the city at all. So
I have a motion from Councilman Hawley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you for coming tonight. Since they say I'm in charge of the meeting, I would like to take a break for 5 minutes. I'm sure everybody needs that, so give us a 5 minutes break and move back to item C.
You know what, I like that. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Giving me a chance to stretch out.
I was sitting, right now I'm sitting for,
Okay, we're ready to continue.
as you group.
And I will start with C1, consideration of a resolution approving a standard offered agreement and escrow instructions for purchase of a real estate for parcel 16 within the Freedom Industrial Park. Mr. Mershon, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The item in front of you is got a long name that you just described, so I won't read that again. Essentially, this is a purchase agreement, purchase and sale agreement, where the city would sell parcel 16 in the Freedom Industrial Park to Span for the purpose of developing a 37,000 square foot building. It'll be a spec building initially, set up with a combination of space and roll doors that can be outfitted to suit a variety of tenants. Consistent with the discussion that we had a few months back about kickstarting economic development, we were getting ready to kind of roll out a public campaign, so to speak, to incentivize construction within the Freedom Industrial Park. And the first folks that stepped to the table were the co-developer of the park, and they said, we're ready to build a building. It'd be great if we could take advantage of this and build on your building, or build on parcel 16 first. And so as kind of a test case, we went ahead and started work on that process. The components of the agreement in front of you would provide that the property is sold at fair market value, which is $320,000. But both the purchase price and the development impact fees that would be due for the 37,000 square foot building would be deferred until either 50% of the building is occupied or 18 months, whichever occurs first. So it provides an opportunity to get started with construction while deferring some of the capital cost that might otherwise make it a little more difficult to financially get started on a parcel. The good thing about this is that assuming that it works the way that it looks like it's going to work, we can use this as a model and make it available for additional properties that the city owns within the park, or potentially down the road as the city acquires additional properties for economic development. The property would transfer to Span as soon as they pull the building permit. If they don't pull the building permit within 6 months, then essentially the agreement goes away. The status of this particular development is that a site plan review is scheduled for Planning Commission consideration next week, next Tuesday, so they're pretty far into the development process. And it's our understanding they are prepared to go to construction pretty quickly after that. They're looking forward to getting started. So this is an important step. We're happy to bring it here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Councilman Rigby.
I don't have any questions, but I would like to applaud staff's innovative forward thinking on this project. I think this is exactly the type of stuff I know that I'm looking forward to seeing more of within city limits, and I am excited about this project, and I have my fingers crossed too, Dave, that this is something that we'll be able to model in the future and other properties that we have throughout the city limits, and I'm looking forward to working with SPAN continually on projects in the future. So thank you so much for staff's hard work on making this work and for kind of thinking outside of the box on this one.
Any other discussion? If not, I need a motion.
Move to approve item C1.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passed unanimously. C2, consideration of a resolution of the Madera Public Financing Authority electing officers.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. As noted in the report, we need to appoint the chairperson, a couple of positions for the Madera Public Financing Authority, which includes the chairperson, vice chair, the executive director, and the secretary. The last time we went through this process was in 2013. We have new elected officials on board, so we want to bring this up to date, and traditionally we've appointed the serving mayor and serving mayor pro tem as chair and vice chair of the authority, and the executive director is the city administrator, secretary is the city clerk. The resolution before you includes those recommendations, and we would request your approval on that.
I need a motion.
Move to approve item C2 as presented.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
C3, consideration of a resolution of the City Council the City Council of the City of Madera approving the agreements with Del Rio Advisory, LLC, for professional services on a limited scope related to potential bond refunding opportunities, and authorizing the mayor to execute the special services agreement and the director of finance service to execute the engagement agreement. This report is going to be given by Mr. Bila. Mr. P.
Timmy P.
I've been working on that, Tim, and I didn't do justice to that, so I apologize. But that was the one thing that made me nervous tonight was your last name, and that I've been working on it. I apologize.
Mr. P.
You know, my dad was a school teacher also at Roosevelt High School for 30 years, and a lot of his students called him Mr. P. So I'll gladly go by Mr. P anytime you like.
Good job. Come
on. And David Merchant thought that his title was long. This evening, simply what this report is hoping to accomplish is approval for us to obtain the services of this firm, Del Rio Advisors, LLC, for the purposes of investigating, looking into our options to refinance some bonds to, again, save some costs for the city. I want to thank council members that had some questions on this in advance, and as a result of that, I'll add a little bit of information to this in the discussion. Again, this is just the first step, so it's not like we have a lot of information on any specific bonds or anything at this time, but we would like to recruit these services for the purpose of investigating, looking into opportunities to save money for the city. And this is just the first step. But as we were preparing this, questions were asked, so I want to give a little bit more information. So in May of 1993, these bonds redeemed, the 1993 bonds redeemed the remaining $4.8 million of the December 8, 1989 lease revenue bonds, Series A, and provided an additional $262,000 for further golf course construction. The original $4.5 million issue of the 1989 lease revenue bonds financed the acquisition, construction, improvement, and equipping of the golf course. So 1989 were the original bonds, refinanced in 1993. We're considering potentially refinancing the variable rate bonds because, you know, recently it came to our attention. I have this is a graph that I received, so you can see that the short-term rates were really very low for a long time, so it looks like they're jumping way up there, but they're still under 1% for the variable rates. But because they jumped, we thought we'd look at and compare our current rates that we're paying with the potential to lock into some fixed rate instrument that might be able to save us money over time. And so that's why we would like to utilize the services of the municipal advisor that we've recommended here. So at this time, staff is merely requesting approval of an agreement with Del Rio Advisors, LLC, to help us evaluate the potential for refinancing the 1993 bonds. An important question that was asked also is, well, we're trying to save money here. How does that fit with, or how does having a $12,500 commitment to a contractor fit into that plan? But this cost here would be included in the cost of issuance of the bonds and spread over the life of the bonds. So we wouldn't have an upfront cost that would come out of our pockets from current operating revenues. It would be included in the cost of issuance of the bonds and spread out over the life of the bonds. So although Del Rio Advisors would get paid, it would come out of the proceeds of the bonds. And hopefully the fiscal impact would be that we would actually save operational costs related to the debt financing of these bonds. I'd be glad to answer any questions that council might have, but we're requesting two actions tonight, one action from the MPFA and one action from the City Council. I believe the order is first the City Council and then the MPFA.
Councilman Hawley.
Yes, I have a question. What's the lifespan of the bond?
So it was a 30-year bond, And the 1993, so what was it, till 2023 until the bonds, I believe the last payment schedule is 2024 at this point.
So that means we'll be using them until 2024?
No, so we would utilize the services of this company just to get the deal done, and then we would continue to pay for the bonds if it's refinanced, and if it's refinanced for the same period through 2024.
Okay.
Yeah, the services of this municipal advisor would just be until the bond issuance is completed. And so the municipal advisor also assists us in selecting bond counsel and bond underwriters if we go through the full bond issuance process, or possibly through direct placement firm, which would make it easier and save money for us as compared to going through a full-blown bond refinance.
And if I may
Public
add to your
issuance.
explanation, generally what you're looking for, savings are generally expressed in terms of net present value. So if you don't see a 3% net present value, you don't proceed with a refinancing as a general rule. And as Tim indicated, this could be a refinancing through an additional bond, or it could be a private placement. That's why you use the financial advisor. They help you in doing that analysis. They help you in making a placement. And if the numbers don't work out, you don't proceed.
Okay, Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Tim, you did bring that chart, and just a question on that. Historically, what have we seen with the rates? What have they done here since the inception of that bond that we've had?
I think in general,
have we always been below a certain percentage?
I think we've done well. Yeah, I think I can't go back to 1993. I didn't look at that. I just looked fairly recently here. But I can share that information with you. But I think we've benefited from being on a variable rate bond, at least in the past few years, because the short-term rates have been very low. Short-term rates seem to be coming up now, where long-term rates don't seem to be affected as much by the Fed rates, but there's a lot to consider. So we're looking at that, when you're having a variable rate bonds, you have to have a letter of credit because those bonds are resold time and time again, and so we're paying 2% for the letter of credit, plus the nearly 1% we're paying for that, plus certain fees that are related to resetting the fees and the different administrative costs related to that. So we're looking at least around 3% at this point. So if we could refinance, lock into something at 3%, maybe we'll benefit from that. But again, that's what we need the municipal advisor to help us look at and consider.
And the only reason why I asked him is because looking at your chart, it seemed like you were low for quite some time, and then you started peaking. So my concern is that at some point in the future, we don't know, we can't predict the rates, right? But, that comes down again, and we can't take advantage of it if we're locked into a rate. Obviously, you said it best, if we don't have a 3%, then that's not something that we consider. That's why these brokers will go out and look for something that's to our benefit. But I just wanted to see what you had in that chart and how far back historically you've gone in those.
We can certainly have the municipal advisor evaluate and present all of that information to council if we see an opportunity to move forward. Ken Deeker is really, he's much better at talking about this information than I am, very well respected. And, so the options that we would look at would be refinancing, continuing with a variable rate, and if we can get a letter of credit from Union Bank again, which that comes due in November, going with the fixed rate with the full bond issuance, public issuance, or going with the private placement. and getting a fixed rate with that also. But sticking with the variable rate would require a letter of credit being extended. At this point, I don't believe that Union Bank is interested in furthering that, but all of those three options we would need Ken Deeker's assistance with.
Thank you, Tim.
And again, I think the report points out that if we do not end up refinancing, Mr. Deeker, his company, doesn't make a penny off of the services that he's put into this.
That's right.
Okay, any other questions? Great report, Mr. Presbila. I'll get it. So I'm looking to entertain a motion on C3.
Move to approve item C3 as presented.
Second.
It's been motioned and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion has been passed unanimously. C4, consideration of a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Madera Public Financing Authority approving the agreements with Del Ria Advisory, LLC for professional services on a limited scope related to potentially bond refunding opportunities and authorizing the chairperson to execute the special service agreement and the Director of Financial Services to execute the engagement agreement of MPFA.
So what Mr. Presbila said, only for the MPFA. So the action has been taken by the city. It's actually the same agreements, I should say, because the engagement agreement plus the agreement with Mr. Deeker. So it's just the same agreement, just asking for an approval by the MPFA.
I move to approve item C4.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on to D1, and we have that person is going to be Lieutenant Estes to report for us.
Lieutenant Brian Estes, standing in for Chief Frazier. We received a written request from the original Madera Californians seeking approval to waive fees and costs associated with the city services of police and public works to facilitate the Old Timers Day Parade. As most of you remember, historically, council has voted to do that, and we see no reason why we shouldn't continue that practice.
Are there any questions or discussion? Okay. Need a motion?
So move to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Lieutenant Estes. No administrative reports. Council reports, starting with Councilman Hawley.
Yeah. Wow. I had an exciting week. To my council partners, I brought some little things. I went to Philadelphia, and I had a great time. But the most exciting thing, I went to their city hall. And they have a city hall that's historic. And the way they do their council reports when they give proclamations, or they put them on a big old piece of, and they open them up inside, and inside they have a big old picture. I hope y'all get this so we can do the same thing, of their city hall. So it's exciting. But on this side over here, which I want to do, they don't do them like we do. They call these citations, and it's the same as a recommendation or a proclamation, and they just call it. And I say, well, what is, citation sounds to me like a ticket. You know, it's what they use to do their, and it's really exciting. And I also had a chance to see their caucus or their council. We got to upgrade a little bit here, y'all, because it was so exciting. And they have approximately 17 councilmen on their board. Sonia, you would be overstaffed. Your hair would be blown out. And I had a chance to walk around. I mean, they gave me, I just want y'all to know, they rolled out the red carpet for Madera. They showed me all the offices that they have. They're set up like the just like they did in signing the Declaration of Independence. That's where their council is set up. They have the president up at the top, just like they do in the government at the state hall, and it all flows down to where y'all send in some rugged seats. They got some seats that's really outdated. But it's just the feel of it is like the old days and how it was set up. So it was really exciting. We can walk around this city hall in 15 seconds. It takes you almost an hour to walk around that whole building and through the different hallways. I got lost twice, but it was worth it because after you out one door, you come around to another one. And I happened to be there when the football arena, they won the championship, the Philadelphia football, the indoor arena football games. They was doing their presentation, and man, it was overcrowded. Had a grand tour. They have so many exciting stores that inside they have a big old restaurant of stores inside this big old building. You go in there, and anything that you want, it's in there. You don't even have to come outside to eat. Any kind of food, you name it, cookies, whatever it is, it's in there. But they don't charge you like you go to McDonald's and you see $1.98 up there. It ain't no $1.98. It ain't don't be there until you get ready to leave. Whatever you want on it, they charge you by the weight. So y'all know how many pounds you ladies gonna get. I mean men. But it was exciting. I had a great time. I'm mad because I got rained out for the game. I had tickets to go to the Philadelphia baseball game, and we got rained out. So that was the only bad part. But I'm tired because I walked. I had some youngsters. I had to tell them 3 or 4 times I'm not as young as y'all. The youngest in the group was 27. The next one stopped at 50. And I ain't going to tell you why I stopped at, but they walked me to death. We had to walk at least 15 miles to a restaurant that they wanted to try some of the Italian food. I said, y'all could have did that in Madera. But it was nice. I really had a good time. The trip was nice. The city of Philadelphia. Now, we was talking about homeless. Y'all ain't got no problem. I'm telling you, they got a problem. But they solved half of their problem because you can't be on the streets before 6, and you have to be off at 10. I don't know where they go, but they're not on the streets. They're down there in the subway, sleeping down there, and it's really dangerous down there that you see all them sitting on the side. So what they're building in Philadelphia right now to minimize that, they're opening up a whole segment of a wall and building little rooms in there for them to sleep in. And it's going to be monitored. So it was well worth the visit, and it was nice. So I'll just give you all an overcap. But the caucus, I really like their city hall, the way it's set up. It's old-fashioned. I got to touch the Liberty Bell. Just want y'all to know. They wouldn't let me ring it. I was trying hard, but it's well guarded. But it was nice. Everything was beautiful. Get a great tour of the whole city. I didn't get to run up the Rocky steps, but I took a picture with Rocky. Me and him had our arms up, so it was nice. It was awesome.
Great to have you back. Councilman Rodriguez.
Mayor Pro Tem, I have no reports at this time, but I do want to make a comment to Councilman Donald Holly. I do have a thing or two. I do know a thing or two about citations, so if you happen to receive a letter from Philadelphia, whether you were lost or touching that Rocky statue, that might be a citation that was issued to you. Just be aware.
Councilman Oliver.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I want to report on a couple different things. We haven't met in quite some time, so I had the opportunity to attend the Madera Chamber of Commerce's Lifetime Achievement Awards. It was a very nice evening in recognition of many well-deserving individuals in our community who have made an indelible impact on Madera, which included Dr. Ashroff, Dale Evans, Kay Rhodes, as well as posthumously Sal Prolongo. As far as the words that came to mind as far as the evening's honorees is compassion, humility, history, stewardship, hard work, and of those, I think one of the individuals that embodies those traits that I was proud to see was also my uncle, Steve Copeland. He was in receipt of that honor. So I was proud to see someone who was really a role model, mentor to me, and obviously the funnest uncle that I have in my family to receive that worthy recognition. So I just wanted to state that for the record, that I was proud of that evening's honorees and their many impacts. I'd like to report that I had the great pleasure to participate in Parks and Community Services Spring Men's Recreational Basketball League, and proud to report that we beat the Punishers in the championship game. We had lost to them twice before in that season, but we pulled it around in the championship. So we're going to be gearing up for this next season. So if any of my colleagues are interested, we can't have more than 3 people to break quorum, but we'd be happy to have you on there. And Marianne, kudos to your staff and for helping coordinate that league, and very responsive and exhibited professionalism throughout. And so it's great to take part in some of the programs and services that we're able to afford. And I'd also just like to say thank you to staff, especially those of you who have made yourself available to meet with me whenever I have questions or ideas or initiatives. Oftentimes my work schedule in Fresno keeps me from being accessible here in Madera, so I appreciate staff's accessibility, oftentimes meeting 7:30 a.m. to hear me out. So I just want to say thank you for your accessibility there. Saving it for you.
Oh, you're saving it for me. Oh, okay. Thank you, Councilman Oliver. Councilman Rigby.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I'm looking forward to spending the weekend at the Madera County Fair, and so I invite my colleagues to come out and enjoy the tasty corn dog or two. Who knows? But I want to take this minute to kind of stand on a soapbox, if I may. These past several days I've been really sensitive to the events that have transpired over our nation, even within our county. I know that the chief and Jimbo had taken off a little earlier, but my prayers are still with those that are affected by the rail fire, as well as with the Mission fire, and I kind of wanted to thank them for all their hard work and the men and women that are up there still trying to retain those fires. Of course, my hearts and prayers are still even with those that are in the Houston, Beaumont area, the southeastern Texas Gulf area, southwest Louisiana, and those that are going to be hit by Irma in the next few days. But over the past 24 hours, I've kind of had a chance to reflect, gather my thoughts in regards to the latest news that has come out of Washington. And as an active member in the Latino caucus of the California League of Cities, as a member of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, I began having conversations with my colleagues, and we began kind of talking about the deferred action of childhood arrivals and the actions that have been taken by Washington, D.C. And I just sort of believe that at this time it's really imperative that as a city we begin to draw a line in the sand as to where we stand as government officials. And I've spoken with the mayor, and I've asked that he draft an official letter of support that would go to elected officials in Washington, D.C., our congressmen as well as senators, to show that we as a community support the community of DACA residents that are here in the city of Madera. These are students that work hard and that I've had the opportunity to work alongside with as a youth pastor, as a coach, as a mentor, and as a friend. And I don't want to force it upon my colleagues, but I know that I will be signing that letter as well as the mayor, and I would hope that you guys would seriously consider, as Congress has some time to figure out how we can effectively support those that are still in our nation. I know that immigration reform is difficult, and I want nothing more than safe borders. I want nothing more than attainable jobs for legalized citizens, but I also know that there's a lot of young men and young women that call Madera home and don't know any other home, and I think that we need to stand by them, and we need to show them that we support their efforts to either attain citizenship in a much quicker way, or begin the process of attaining whether it's a work visa or a academic visa. but I'd like to just kind of go on record for staff that the mayor will be probably addressing this when he returns, Sonia, and so I appreciate the cooperation.
Thank you, Councilman Rigby. And best for last over there, Councilman Robertson.
Yes, last night I attended the Madera County Adult Probation Department Summer 2017 Transition Ceremony. It was 22 applicants who completed the program. It was a difficult program. In fact, some had repeated the program. But it just goes to show that you can turn your life around. You know, and what happened in the past is in the past, and looking forward to the future. And it was, you know, it was a very emotional ceremony. People was there. The family member was there. He was at the VFW. And since I've, you know, worked a total of like 16 years in juvenile hall, I know that, you know, what our youth are going through. And when you think of all the homeless teenagers and all around our cities, San Francisco, Hollywood, you know, they need a program to help them out. They're out in the streets, homeless. You know, our citizens. And then today I help in the hurricane relief for Houston. And it was it's a big turnout. A lot of people was there to help sort out all the donations, and it made me Madera proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Robertson. And real fast, our youth for the NAACP is collecting clothing. If anybody has any clothes or shoes they'd like to donate for Hurricane Harvey victims, they're going to be collecting that the next week to have it shipped off with the Armory. So they're working very closely with them. They haven't gotten a drop or a location, but you can get it to me, and I've been compiling stuff from some of the schools, and so if anybody has a box at home or something, bring it on or just contact me, and I'll run by and pick it up. Councilman Oliver and Mayor Medillan attended with myself the Olive event, which is for our police department, Lieutenant Foss, who puts on every year, which came up with a challenge. The date that was given to them was Labor Day weekend, which meant a lot of people out of town. It was the night they were retiring Derek Carr's jersey, which sold out Fresno State Stadium. And a Giants game had a big game, so a lot of our residents went to those events. So he was kind of worried that he wasn't going to get the numbers and thinking, what am I going to do? This event has carried him over to fund his program for an entire year. I have to say, we rose to the occasion. There was a lot of new faces. It wasn't the same crowd that we've seen, but it was very impressive to see that it was a packed house. Silent auction, dessert auction was wonderful. The police department did a great job, and I'd like to commend them on that event. And I was truly thrilled to see the bodies there on top of the heat. I thought that would, deter some people from coming that night also. So kudos to them. I also spoke with our Neighborhood Watch program captains who are on Jennings Street, who was really concerned with some paved lines in the street that were there that kind of got paved over when we redid the street. And they pulled together as a neighborhood and expressed their concerns. And I have to say, our staff did a great job. They called and emailed. They're elated that their lines are back on their street. And we're meeting again with them at the end of the month. And I'm sure they'll have more to say about how our staff and our city has come together. And it does work. Residents coming to us as councilmen and code enforcement who's there and Neighborhood Watch, and that how it does make a difference being out in the community and not just coming here and trying to express their concerns, because we're busy in our lives and sometimes it's hard to get here and to stay till late at night. So I commend everybody on that point. And I would like to move to closed session, and our city attorney, Mr. Richardson, has an announcement. Oh,
please.
Yes.
We'll bring this back to you at a later date, but I want everybody to be aware. And September 27th, at Rose Elementary School. They're going to do an open dedication to the school to all those who would love to come and attend. They're going to open up the cafeteria that they haven't opened up yet, but it's going to be a great presentation of roses. The Garden Club is going to present roses. They're going to be planting roses around to honor her, and I think it would be something that we should all go out and show our participation to everybody. Brand new school. So that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson?
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, the council will now adjourn to closed session in 3 items, the first 2 of which are under the same exception. It's conference with legal counsel in anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D2. Both of those, there's 1 case each in those first 2 items. The third item is conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, and there are 4 properties as listed on the agenda.
Okay, we'll see everyone in a bit. Don't go anywhere. I'd like to call a meeting back into order. Mr. Richardson has an announcement.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, the council adjourned to closed session in 3 items, the first 2 being conference with legal counsel and anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D2, 2 separate cases. No reportable action was taken in that matter. The third item was conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, and no reportable action was taken in that matter either.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I would like to adjourn this meeting. Next regular meeting, September 20th, 2017.